Well, we might as well. We're reading the Book of Giants. This is part, what, 15? 15? Something like that. And we are on page 175 out of 222. So 79% done. David, good evening, family. I made it. Just Superman, fed the cows and hogs and flew inside. Everyone was wearing their hoof watches. I love all of you, David. That's phenomenal. Phenomenal. Something else that's kind of phenomenal, I guess, at least partially interesting, was this. So statistics are changing a little, maybe. We'll see. Half of churches are seeing growth since COVID-19. Now, there's a lot of factors that play a part in this. So a report by Lifeway Research, which is obviously a biased publication, published Tuesday, found 52% of surveyed Protestant congregations saw their worship attendance grow by at least 4% over the past 2 years. By contrast, 33% of the surveyed congregations said attendance had plateaued, with between 4 decline to 4 growth, 4%, while 15% reported experiencing over 4% decline in worship attendance. 57% of evangelical congregations reporting at least 4% growth versus 46% of mainline congregations reporting the same. Additionally, 62% of Pentecostal congregations have seen at least a 4% growth within the last 2 years, as well as 59% of Baptist congregations. By contrast, 43% of Methodist congregations and 37% of Lutheran congregations reported a growth of at least 4%. Ghost ain't the only flyer. Hey, Ghost. Oh, I gotta open Discord. I thought that was interesting because we've talked about it a number of times. The what happens to the church thing. Well, I guess this is Bible study, isn't it? Whoops. Whatever. Hey, Tampa, I will invite you now so you don't have to raise your hand. Look at that. On top of stuff. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, so I don't know. I find this interesting that churches are reporting higher attendance. I don't find it surprising. I just have more questions. So I think within the next 2 years from now, the data will get extrapolated a bit, and then it'll be more reliable, and I'd be curious to see what that looks like. There's a very obvious increase in Orthodoxy and Catholicism. And I think a part of it is just younger people, and not just kids, but like younger adults, are flocking to traditionalism in some sense, and to just stability. Like, you can bank on the Catholics doing what the Catholics do. You can bank on the Orthodox doing what the Orthodox do. You can bank on it because they have routine, they have ritual. And I think younger people just they need it, is what it seems like, because they just lack it in every area of their life. So I saw that. I thought that was kind of interesting. I'll be interested to see how that all pans out over the next 3 to 5 to 10 years, though. Patricia, interesting stuff. The second question is, what kind of people are these? That would be my follow-up. But hopefully it's a positive trend of positive people, preferably. All right, is all of this good? We're almost done with the Book of Giants here. And then we got to roll into something else heretical and non-canonical. And we'll have to discuss what that's going to be. I think we left at 60 and 61. I believe. I have a migraine, so let's see how long I last. Oh God, go lay down in the dark, man. That's no fun. Go put a hot rag or a cold rag. I don't know which one it is. Put a rag of some kind, of some temperature, on your face and go lay down. I feel like this is not the place. I hope you're not watching the screen. Just listen if you insist. Migraines are no fun. No fun at all. All right. 60. And every excess and the destruction which will be done through the shepherds, record how many they destroy according to my command, and how many according to their own caprice. Record against every individual shepherd all the destruction he effects, and read out before me by number how many they destroy, and how many they deliver over for destruction, that I may have this as a testimony against them, and know every deed of the shepherds, that I may comprehend and see what they do, whether or not they abide by my command, which I have commanded them. Yeah, that sounds like a smart plan. Smart plan for the migraine girl. Be careful. I've heard horrible stories about migraines. I don't think I've ever had a migraine. I've had gnarly headaches. But what the stories I've heard about the migraines, I don't think I've ever experienced that. But I sympathize. This is brutal from what it seems. But they shall not know it, and you shall not declare it to them, nor admonish them, but only record against each individual all the destruction which the shepherds effect each in his time, and lay it all before me. And I saw until those shepherds pastured in their season, and they began to slay and to destroy more than they were bidden. And they delivered those sheep into the hand of the lions. And the lions and tigers and bears, oh my. And the lions and tigers ate and devoured the greatest part of those sheep. And the wild boars ate along with them. And they burned that tower and demolished that house. And I became very sorrowful over that tower, because that house of the sheep was demolished. And afterwards, I was unable to see if those sheep entered the house. And the shepherds and their associates delivered over those sheep to all the wild beasts to devour them, and each one of them received in his time a definite number. It was written by the other in a book how many each one of them destroyed of them. And each one slew and destroyed many more than was prescribed. And I began to weep and lament on account of those sheep. And thus, hey Graves, and thus in the vision I saw that one who wrote, how he wrote down every one that was destroyed by those shepherds, day by day, and carried up and laid down and showed actually the whole book to the Lord of the sheep, everything that they had done, and all that each one of them had made away with, and all that they had given over to destruction. And the book was read before the Lord of sheep, and he took the book from his hand and read it and sealed it and laid it down. There's an author's note for verses 65 to 69 that says it refers to the first temple being destroyed, which makes sense. Verse 72 to 73, it begins the story of Ezra and the return of Jerusalem, the return to Jerusalem to rebuild the city and the temple. That's interesting. Okay, so we're about to read that. We're on 70. Starting at 72 is the story of Ezra and the return to Jerusalem to rebuild the city and the temple. And I saw how the shepherds pastured for 12 hours, and behold, 3 of those sheep turned back and came and entered and began to build up all that had fallen down of that house. But the wild boars tried to hinder them, but they were not able. And they began again to build as before, and they raised up that tower, and it was named the High Tower. And they began again to place a table before the tower. But all the bread on it was polluted and not pure. Go said, or all the watchers deemed shepherds. I'm not clear on that, to be honest. I'm not sure. Do you have an opinion about that? Okay, that was all. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it's a good question. I'm not confident one way or the other. Geoffrey. The watchers could not have been shepherds because they were instructed not to make contact with the humans. They were not supposed to teach us anything, They were abominations in God's eyes. Ooh, so we have a conflict here. The Ghost said, I assume yes, that the Watchers were all deemed shepherds, but is not sure. And Geoffrey says, absolutely not. Geoffrey is like a beaver looking at running water. Absolutely not. The Watchers, I want to read this again. The Watchers could not have been shepherds because they were instructed not to make contact with the humans. They were not supposed to teach us anything. They were abominations in God's eyes. Ghost God, Deuteronomy 32:8. Let's see. 32:8 out of Deuteronomy. When the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. Okay. Maybe they're two groups. Yeah. Yeah. This I lean that direction for sure. Hey, it's Heidi. Hey, Heidi. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I thought that was Pia for a second because of the emojis. That's adorable. That is Heidi. She is lovely. She is wonderful. And she has been with us through some events so far. She is resilient. I will say that with respect. Mikhail, abominations before God's eyes. Wasn't God creator of everything there is? Which is fundamentally my problem with this. I try to keep my mouth shut, but of course Mikhail had to say something. I have a hard time with this question specifically because of something I was talking to Kat about the other night when we were doing our Jesus calling at night because we are good little Christians. I have a hard time because of the not only just logical inconsistency, but the theological inconsistency with a lot of these ideas and theories. They can't all be true. Like we can't in one breath, in my opinion, in my total individual humble opinion, I don't believe we can say something like God created everything and everything was good. And then in the next breath, say that these things are bad. They're not consistent unless then you go to the free will thing and you take that to its absolute conclusion, but nobody does. They eventually along the line of free will remove the free will. It gets ripped out by all Christians of all denominations, no matter what. They just don't admit it. And so I have a really hard time with these, personally. Pia is still the emoji queen, can't be dethroned. I agree with that. Heidi has been a random but lovely step in for the emojis, though. She has done good work. Ghost said abominations can only be created through free will, in my opinion. There you go. So those abominations weren't direct creations. So more of the product of a series of free will movements and actions that result in abominations is what I took from that, at least, which I would agree with if that's what you're saying. Geoffrey said, yes, he created all the angels with free will, and the ones that chose to live outside of his love became abominations on earth. I'm going to choose silence. Not, and to be clear, not because I disagree with what Geoffrey said at all. I don't disagree with this at all. But it opens up the conversation that I just don't think anybody wants to have. And mostly because we've had it before. And I don't want it to be repetitive. Byproduct. Yes. Yes. More or less, yes. Heidi said, I did some research on the gods, or angels. In Genesis 6 created the giants gene of... Is that Isis? It's not Isis. For a number of reasons, it's not Isis. Wait, that is what you mean. I assume from the emojis that I'm not going to verbally say because I don't trust YouTube, but... if you want to explain that more, you can. I'm trying to remember, Kat, if you remember the specific thing we were talking about the other night, pertaining to free will. I'm having a hard time fully breaking it down in my head. If you remember, and I don't expect you to, because I know I rant and it becomes complicated. But if you happen to, the gene of ISIS is not ISIS though, is it? Am I just stupid? I guess I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. Yeah, no, ISIS is ISIS. That would be the Islamic State. But I guess I just need you to explain more before I go down this path unwarranted. Mikhail said free will is a rabbit hole in itself. Free will is the greatest rabbit hole of all. And it's tough because I think every theological bend of Christianity, every denomination abandons it at a point. I don't think any of them are logically consistent in actuality. They all abandon it. It's at what point along the trail of free will do they abandon it? And you know, they each have the turn that they eventually take. I don't believe any Christians believe in absolute free will, which I find to be problematic. Kat said, "Oh man, something about faith over free will." It was about free will, in that I think we were talking about Babylon, and about this idea that a deity would make humanity, give them free will, but then any of those people who aren't a part of his chosen people get brutally murdered by directive of the deity. So if God creates all of these beautiful people, the Bible says, you know, everybody has purpose, everybody has meaning. Well, unless they don't choose him, then his chosen people, the beautiful, wonderful Israel, will be literally directed by God per the Bible to brutally murder men, women, and children. Thank you, because that sparked what was in my head. That's what we were kind of talking about, was the struggle of that, because free will is entangled in there, but it's problematic. Theologically and logically, in my opinion, it's problematic. Which is why Christians will eventually stray off of the free will path, in my opinion, in my very heretical opinion. Yes, that was it. That portion of the conversation. Yeah, thank you. You're lovely. David said, I peered into the rabbit hole and thought I saw a ghost in Mikhail. Yeah, if you ever peer into... Never mind. If you peer into any atrocious rabbit hole of wild stuff, Mikhail and Ghost will be sitting there. We should do a free will podcast. Yeah, we should. Did we do a poll for next week? No, because I suck, right? There's no way I was on it that much. It's Thursday. There's no way I already did it. I'm down for that, because free will has come up a bit. So let's just let's executive decision free will for Tuesday. Actually, let's do a poll, because I hear that helps with YouTube stuff. So we'll do that. Uh-oh. We should not, Ghost? Why? Why don't you want to do free will, Kat? That's a great idea. Kat, look at how I chose to capitalize words in the poll title, because it will upset you. Geoffrey said, I believe I found where all the angels were created. Genesis 1, verse 16. All right, let's go. Genesis 1:16 says, and God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. And he made the stars also. So going back to your comment, you said they were called the stars and they were all created. Perfect with free will. So my question would be, and I don't disagree, I don't agree or disagree, but God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. How are you specifically interpreting those two first? And then I understand you're saying the stars are the angels. How are you interpreting the great light for the day and the great light for the night? Decisions, Kat. We should use our free will to decide. Geoffrey said, I am also heretical. That's why you're here. I think we're all heretical in the actual use of the term, which is why we all get along, even when we disagree on all kinds of stuff. And it's a really, really beautiful thing. It's the respect I have for, you know, the small group of people who we all do this with is immense. All right, I will end the poll because I know it's annoying on the screen. Got you lose. We're talking about free will. And I'm going to set up a mic for you, so be ready. Sweet, sweet girl. Mikhail said, can we categorize perfect an angel with free will if with perfect we mean in total submission to God? Where is freedom of choice on that perfection? Oh, baby girl, I got to read that again. Okay. Can we categorize perfect an angel with free will if with perfect we mean in total submission to God? Where is freedom of choice on that perfection? I mean, I suppose you could argue they have the free will, and with their free will, they chose perfect submission to God. I guess. Other than that, I think it's a great question, because I think it's a hard question. That'd be a tough one to reason through. David says, not sure if I am chosen to watch the Free Will podcast. You were not predestined for it, David. It was not decided before you were... Never mind, I can't say that. Before you were a thought, I guess I could say. I love and hate the topic. I argue with myself over it quite often, actually. You have some good stuff on free will. You should get in on that one. Same. Sometimes I feel on the rails and other times I don't, says Ghost. Yeah, I think it's complicated. Well, good. You're smart enough to vote for the winning team, though. It's a part of why I love you. Hard questions indeed. Yeah. Mikhail, that's a great question, though. I like how you phrase that. It's a really good question. Go said free will is a ladder to perfection. Time is required because growth and change is involved. Yeah, I mean, true. As usual, I think I picture it and I interpret it in a different expression, but I agree with the content, which is why I love you, because you say things that I think in a very different way than how I think them, and it forces me to be like, no, I agree. Yeah. Like with Mikhail, that was really well said. Yeah, we'll do that rabbit hole because that'll be interesting. Free will's tough. Probably what I'll do is just provide it'll. I mean, it's a philosophical question, so we're right on target with where we've been the past couple of weeks. So I'll probably just compile dozens of philosophical problems surrounding or containing free will, and we can just kind of reason through them for an hour. I think that would be good. Joffrey said, in my interpretation, to the greater and lesser light. Oh, okay. His greater light is his masculinity, sun, and his lesser light is his femininity. That's why the sun is his... There's no follow-up. You left us hanging, Joffrey. Well, when you finish that, I'll read it. This makes sense to me, and this is kind of where I thought you were going because of some stuff you said last week or the week before. I think the week before, about some of this. I don't mean it this way, but like this kind of gendered interpretation. And yeah, I don't agree, but I find it interesting. That's why, I don't know if you ever did, but that's why we all kind of hoped that you'd go to Discord and write out that explanation for what you were talking about a couple weeks ago. Because I'm very interested in how you view that and kind of how you justify it. But I understand you don't use Discord, and that's fine. Hopefully we can change you at some point. I'd be very curious to see. Oh my God, what's happening? Is Ghost having to actually moderate right now? That would be a first. I think. I don't know. Maybe Ghost is massively moderating in the background. I just don't know. I can't imagine that's true, though. Alrighty. 71. Right, yeah, 71. And they began again to build as before, and they raised up that tower, and it was named the High Tower. How fitting. And they began again to place a table before the tower. But all the bread on it was polluted and not pure. I already read that, for sure. So 72. And as touching all this, the eyes of those sheep were blinded so that they saw not. And the eyes of their shepherds likewise were blinded. And they delivered them in large numbers to their shepherds for destruction. And they trampled the sheep with their feet and devoured them. And the Lord of the sheep remained unmoved until all the sheep were dispersed over the field and mingled with the beasts. And the shepherds did not save them out of the hand of the beasts. And this one who wrote the book carried it up and showed it and read it before the Lord of the sheep, and implored him on their account and besought him on their account as he showed him all the doings. To be clear, hold on, because this is hard if you're just listening to it. So the beginning of 74 again. And this one who wrote the book carried it up and showed it and read it before the Lord of sheep, and implored him, capitalized, on their account, and besought him, capitalized, on their account as he showed him, capitalized, all the doings of the shepherds, and gave testimony before him, capital, against all the shepherds. There is an author's note here that says Ezra, Haggai, and Zechariah return and wrote books of the Old Testament. That's an interesting connection here. I don't know if I agree with this one. Who am I? But I think this one's kind of flat to me. Which was 72 and 73 being the story of Ezra, the return to Jerusalem to rebuild the city and the temple. No, not for me. I get where it's coming from, but I don't know if I adhere to that. That author's note again said, Ezra, Zechariah, and Haggai return and wrote books of the Old Testament. So in relation to their authorship, which I don't know if I'm on board with that entirely. And he took the actual book and laid it down beside him and departed. I'd agree with that for the most part, Geoffrey. Really? That's interesting. I'm way more curious now. So Ghost agrees with the gendered interpretation of the lights. That's surprising to me. I wouldn't have guessed that. You're hard to read, man. Mikhail said, when discussing free will, a glass of amber liquid most definitely helps. I'm sure it does. I have my own amber liquid. It is just not alcoholic in nature. Bloke seems legit, though. I feel like I missed something, but I'm just going to move right along. Geoffrey said, the Most High literally gave authority over the day to his son, and authority over the night to his daughter. The sun and the moon have authority over all of what we know. Then the heavenly host equals stars, and that's it. And yeah, sure. I don't disagree with the premise, but I don't agree with the interpretation of the specific text, I guess, is where my issue lies. But I definitely get it, for sure. Any wild boar questions should be directed to me, says David. I wouldn't be surprised if Ghost did know how to juggle. Patricia, like, that wouldn't surprise me. Ghost interpreting Genesis 1:16 from a gendered context surprises me. Ghost being able to juggle like a G would not surprise me. This would be par for the course. Mikkel said, Heidi, nice to see you around with Schrodinger's cat alive and well. Oh, YouTube deleted her. YouTube moderated her. Got it. Patricia said, you got to hear all about Ghost's interpretation of 1/3 of the Trinity being feminine. I would like to hear it, yeah. My views on the Trinity are actually pretty dramatically changing over the past couple of months. Pretty heretical in nature, I must say. Kat and I, that's another thing we've kind of talked about. And it's forced me to think about it more than I normally would. And I think my views are changing pretty dramatically. Go said, sun is a symbol for sending and moon is a symbol for receiving. I think sending and receiving is a fundamental pattern to the universe. So is gender interpretation required for any of that to be true? I guess. And maybe it's unrelated. Or maybe I'm connecting two things that you don't mean for me to connect. I don't disagree with that. As usual, I would never look at it like that. But I suppose in a sense I agree. But the gendered aspect of it, I don't agree. I know you didn't say that. Geoffrey said that, but I think you said that you agreed with that. I have a hard time with that one. Heidi kind of disappeared all of a sudden. Yeah, she did. I thought it was being moderated, but now I understand that's probably not what happened. I'm juggling cooking and commenting. What are you cooking? Go said, male equals sending, female equals receiving. Okay, so then maybe this is the problem. I think we're having a semantic issue. What is male and female outside of an organism context? I think we need to define terms. I'm starting to get an inkling that we have a communication problem.
Like opposite, like positive and negative.
Right. Which makes a lot more sense. I wonder why. I guess from Ghost and Geoffrey, can you clarify that we're talking about sending and receiving, not male and female? Is male and female just the way you think that the Bible tried to express things in human terms? Or does it extrapolate?
That's what I think anyways.
I agree. If that's the case, I agree.
No, it's two polar opposites that just kind of like complement one another.
Agree.
They
and
need
fit
one for the other.
Right. Yeah, I have a really hard time, and I always push back on the gender thing, and not for like cultural reasons, but I think it's just a poor way. I think people get too lost in that interpretation wise in the Bible, and I think it's caused a lot of problems. Patricia says the moon is feminine. Why? Justify it. Show your work. And I guess, what do you mean by feminine? That it receives? Or that there's a human feminine nature? Because that's kind of the problem. Is a lot of time people will interpret the Bible, and when they say feminine, they mean it from a human context. As in, like, for lack of a better term, girly or anti-masculine. And I don't agree with any of that. I don't think these things have a feminine or masculine nature whatsoever. Personally. As far as like sending and receiving, that's a very, very, very different conversation to me. And I agree with kind of how Tampa threw it out there. Geoffrey said that's why all the ancient religions had a sun god and a moon god. Oh, a sun god and a moon god. And they were the most powerful of the gods. Well, see, I agree with that. I do not disagree with that. Go said anything that sends is masculine and anything that receives is feminine. It's just how language works. So we are just talking using those terms having nothing to do with actual gender or nature, but simply for either the pushing or the pulling. Because I have to clarify, because so many people will interpret that in a very different way, where they're using gendered terms as actual descriptors from a human organism context, and I think that's a problem. Okay, nothing to do with actual biology. Then I totally agree. I completely and entirely agree. The sending and receiving, I think, is accurate, and I think there's quite a bit of that in different contexts. It'd be another thing that I would say is fractal in nature. You see a lot of it in a lot of different regards. Patricia said menstruation is the biggest reason why I believe that. Men's circadian rhythms connected to the sun cycle versus women's circadian rhythms connected to the moon cycle. Interesting. I've heard the moon thing. I have not heard the sun thing from the masculine side. And I know nothing about that, so I guess I don't really have an opinion. I'd be curious to learn about that though. But does that make something? Oh, go ahead, Tampa.
Think about early in the morning time for gentlemen. I'll leave it there.
Okay, yeah, no, fair. But I mean, that's so then we'd have to prove. I mean, it's known, and I get blood done like relatively frequently, so it's entirely and completely tied to testosterone peaking in the morning for men and then tapering out through the rest of the day. So then for me to convince me, I'd have to have some kind of, what is the evidence that men's peak testosterone upon waking is connected to the sun somehow? Because I've never heard that. And testosterone, like, I've been involved for a long time, from the bodybuilding days and whatnot. So I'd be curious though. I just don't know that that's true. It makes sense, like on his face, with the waking up, peak testosterone as the sun comes up. I guess. But I mean, I'd say I for a long time woke up before the sun came up, and it was the same. My testosterone peaked before the sun came up, hours before the sun came up. So is it actually tied to the sun, or is it just have to do with when you're waking from sleep? And I don't know, to be clear. I have no idea. I think that's a really interesting theory, though, and I'd genuinely be curious to like learn more about that. I've heard the woman thing. I've never heard the male side of that. It's very interesting. Go said humans personify concepts to better teach and remember them. I agree. It just becomes really convoluted. Because then people like you do it in good faith and mean one thing. And there are other people who maybe even still do it in good faith, but mean an entirely different thing. And because we rely on these terms, it becomes very complex and convoluted and becomes hard to follow. For me. Honeymoon Steich? Shalom, shalom, my beloved brethren. What's going on, honey? Patricia said, women have that monthly cycle like a moon waxing and waning process. The man is on a 24-hour clock. They don't have hormonal changes throughout the month like a woman does. I mean, I get that. I'm curious, how do we know it's tied to that? Like, is this just kind of something that has gone around and people assume because it makes sense, or are there studies on it? I'd be curious. It makes sense to me, but I'm the cynic. I'd like to see some data, but it makes sense. Go said, I've never heard that either. I'm just coming at it from a strictly language perspective. Patricia, their hormones change throughout certain times of the day. I read 7 to 10 is men's lowest hormonal point, though. Kind of. I don't know. I've gotten a lot of bloods done over the past 10 years, specifically for testosterone. And the majority of men peak when they wake up, and then it just slowly goes out through the day. They'll have peaks here and there depending on what they're doing. Like, there are things that stimulate testosterone. Some of them have to do with diet. Some of them have to do with exercise. You'll usually get some kind of a spike during or after exercise. There are things like that, but if nothing was done, if a man just woke up and laid in bed all day long, my understanding from the data is that they'll peak in the morning and then they'll just slowly taper out the rest of the day. So by the time they go to bed, they're at their lowest point of testosterone on average. But I think that still makes sense with what you're saying. I would just be curious, how do we know that it's tied to the sun? Like, what is the reason to believe that? I'd be curious about that. The woman's thing, I think, is really interesting. And I've heard that before, and I've read a little bit about it. And that makes sense to me. The English, French, even Latin language words are also very watered down. Weak and corrupted. I don't know what that was in reference to. I don't disagree, though, I guess. I think English is very weak and corrupted. Because they're analogs, 24-hour cycle like the sun at verse 28, day cycle like the moon. Finding analogs is key. Right. But I feel like it could be something else also. I don't know. I mean, to be honest, I have no idea. I'd have to think about this. And I'd be interested to see like data on it. Because I am the cynic. The sun doesn't wax and wane. It's just there. Yeah, I don't know. This is an interesting theory that is new to me. The male side, at least, is new to me. Geoffrey said the way I can tie the moon directly through scripture to Mother Mary is in Revelation 12, where she is shown standing on the moon. The moon that she has always has authority over according to Genesis 1:16. All right, well, I'd like to pull that up. So Revelation 12, and you're going to make me pull this specific verse. Is it 12:1? A woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, yeah, and a crown of 12 stars on her head, who gives birth to a male child who will rule all nations with an iron rod. I'd be curious, Ghost, well, I know you're busy too, so if you're too busy, it's all good, but because I think you agree with Geoffrey's whole spiel, what do you think of that Revelation 12:1? And I'll read it again, because I know you're busy. It says, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head, who gives birth to a male child who will rule all nations with a rod of iron. Do you agree that this ties the moon directly through scripture to Mother Mary, where she is shown standing on the moon that she has always had authority over, according to Genesis 1:16? So that then tying to the previous verse we read, to Genesis. This is interesting. It's interesting. I'm a tough one to crack with this kind of stuff, though. But I'm trying to be more open, because my opinions keep dramatically changing. So I'm very, very open to new stuff. Patricia said, there's definitely a lot of studies. I could info dump a ton to you regarding the women's four phases and how it would connect to the moon, but the men's I would have to study more for sure and get back. Yeah, see, if you find stuff for the male thing, definitely send it to me, because I'm genuinely very curious. I've read some stuff about the women's thing, and it makes sense. And it's very interesting. I had just never heard the male thing. It wouldn't shock me. I'm just super cynical. So I'd be curious to see like how how are they justifying it? What is the actual raw data that they're like, because of this, then that? Because I feel like we could justify the peak of the male testosterone early in the morning with other things. So I don't know if the sun is required. And I believe even if you remove the sun, it still happens. Meaning like men who wake up at midnight to go to work will still peak testosterone. So I don't believe it's tied to the sun. But I'd be happy to be wrong. Heidi said the Hebrew Yashareel, Israelites worshiped Yahweh, and their calendar and Sabbath, I think, followed the moon phases. Yeah, we've been talking about that a lot recently, and maybe I'm totally wrong about everything, because I'm just super cynical about like astrology and whatnot. But we've been talking about that a bit too. So we need to do that on a Tuesday soon as well. Astrology's come up a lot recently for whatever reason. I mean, probably a lot of it having to do with what we're reading right now. But we need to do that one too, because I'm very ignorant on that. Astrotheology, Ghost said. Yes. That's what we need to do. That is what we need to do. I'd have to put some serious time into that though, because I really don't know anything. So I'd have to approach it as like a live study where I also learn everything, because I don't know a thing about it. That would be a stretch. I think it's just a clock. What did I miss? Oh, followed the sun calendar like the Romans. Amen Ra, the sun god, the Egyptian god. Mikkel said, Patricia, share everything you can find about it on Discord. It's quite interesting what you're sharing with us. I completely agree. This would blow my mind a little bit if the male thing is also tied to the sun. I would have my mind blown a little bit. It would go against much of what I currently feel I know, which is great. It's always fun. Illustrating Christ's birth. Astrotheology. I feel like I missed something, Ghost. Fractals, the more things line up with a pattern, the more valid it is. Totally agree. I think that's how we've determined so much of what has been determined, is through repetitive fractal patterns. Patricia said, but they're peaking every day, right? Like there's not certain times of the month they have lower testosterone. Well, right. Yeah, absolutely. From what I understand, absolutely. But what does it have to do with the sun? Or does it not have to do with the sun on a micro scale? And it has to do with the sun on a more macro scale. Maybe I'm misunderstanding what was initially said. I guess I also just like don't know a lot about the sun. So is the sun doing a certain thing? Well, no, that wouldn't make sense. Yeah, I don't know. How does it tie to the sun? What is the function that ties it to the sun? Because it can't be morning, because the men who wake up at midnight still peak. Even men who wake up at 10 p.m. and work overnight still peak. From what I understand, they still peak. It has to do with their sleep cycle, not with the sun. But I could very well be wrong. Fractals, the more things line up with the pattern, the more valid it is, the more valid the pattern is. Ghost corrected. Yeah. I thought you were pretty clear. Heidi says she follows the moon phases for Sabbath. Heidi, are you Jewish or are you Christian? You have to be Christian, right? From some of the stuff you said. I find that kind of interesting. Why do you choose to follow the moon phases for the Sabbath? Tampa said, I thought that's why the boy chicken and you know what was called the same thing. What? I thought that's why the boy chicken and the you know what, oh, the you know what was called the same thing. I don't know the answer to that question, actually. I'm looking it up, just to be clear.
I don't want to say it on your, like you know, they say cock-a-doodle-doo.
Yeah. No, it took me a minute, but I got it.
Okay.
So it says possible origins, roosters, which are called that thing. The word, that one, originally refers to a rooster, an animal known for its dominance, aggression, and mating behavior. Because of this, the term likely became associated with male virility and was later used as a slang for that thing. Another possibility, Old English usage. In medieval English, that word was sometimes used to describe spouts, taps, or small projecting parts or objects. This association with protruding or standing structures may have contributed to its use as a euphemism for the male thing. And then the third option is just word evolution and double meaning. By the 17th century, that word was already widely used in a slang sense. Over time, it became more vulgar, leading to the more formal use of rooster for the bird to avoid awkwardness in polite conversation by calling a rooster that word. I hope we all learned something tonight. So apparently from what this is saying, it comes from the dominance, the aggression, and the mating behavior of the animal, which I suppose makes sense. I don't know. The sun peaks once a day. That's a data point. That's a great point. Actually, see how easy that was? That's a great point. That's a great point. So as a matter of fact, the time at which it peaks is irrelevant. Brainstorming here. It is irrelevant, but just that it peaks is relevant. And that of the male testosterone also peaks. That's a data point. Easy enough. Nailed it. I would love to learn more. I'm very curious about this now. Geoffrey said, when it says clothed in the sun, that reminds me of the sun reflecting off the moon. That's also actually really interesting. That was Revelation 12:1, where it said a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet. And Geoffrey is saying clothed in the sun reminds me of the sun reflecting off the moon. That's also a fantastic point. That's interesting. Clothed with the sun, Ghost said, is like saying at 9/27/2030. Why do you say that? Ghost said, when you see X in the Y, it's Z time. The zodiac is a clock. Revelation 12 was for our generation, the generation that has software to dial back the clock to see when all of those symbols were in the Virgo constellation. Okay. I have to sit on that. Yeah, I'll have to sit on that. That's a lot. Honeymoon, astronomy, okay. Astrology, no. That is the Nephilim doctrine. I think Ghost was talking about astrotheology. I think they're all relevant, just in different ways and to different points, I suppose. Patricia looks like she got cut off somewhere, or I'm missing a comment. Biblical day starts at sunrise. Are there any cultures that don't start a day at sunrise? Do it. But just remember this and we'll come back to it. Remember this and we'll come back to it. I'd like him to decode that last bit of thought there. My migraine can't interpret it. Well, don't feel bad because my totally fine mind can't interpret it. Heidi said the moon phases are every 7 nights. Each month never ever changes. Yahweh created the luminary, sun, moon, stars, time, days, Sabbath, months, years. I'm not sure I follow. Unless that was about your Sabbath. You follow the Sabbath by the moon. The Stellarium program can let you dial back time. When you dial back to 9/11 3 BC, you will see the description in Revelation 12. Okay. The stream is having a problem? Let me see. Excellent connection. Everything looks good for me. The work of the Nephilim. Yeah, I don't know. Hopefully it goes away. Everything looks good right now. Hopefully just a YouTube thing. We look solid. Okay, I wanted to see this. Ghost in the Stellarium. So, Stellarium is a free open source planetarium software that allows users to explore the night sky in real time. It provides a realistic 3D simulation of stars, planets, constellations, and other celestial objects as seen from Earth. Okay, so if you use Stellarium, the program can let you dial back in time. When you dial back to 9/11 3 BC, you will see the description in Revelation 12. How is that possible? How is that? I have so many questions. One, how is it collecting data from before technology existed? This is probably a really dumb question, but I've never used the software and I didn't know what it was until 3 seconds ago. How does that work fundamentally? You don't have to answer now. We'll talk about this again another time because I know you're typing and you're not around. But I have that question, and then I have a question as to just like, how is that true? You'll see the description of Revelation 12. I'm very curious about this now. Norlistapes? No, really? Yeah, I don't know what your name is, bro. But good to have you. The evening and the morning makes a day. Evening starts the day. See Genesis. What was that in reference to? I assume another comment. Patricia said, maybe my message didn't come through. I said, I don't think it matters what time the man wakes up. It's more about how they are on a daily clock rather than a monthly clock. Okay. Well, yeah, I think we've all come to the same place now. I'm with you guys. I just wonder if there's I wonder why the connection. Because I feel that you could make an argument it's just reliant on their sleep cycle. But then I suppose you could extrapolate that out and say, well, the sleep cycle is kind of contingent on the sun. I don't know. I would just be curious to learn more about this, about the male side of it specifically. I find this very interesting, and I'm just a very bitter, cynical person. So if you ever do come across something substantive, My internet is super fast. YouTube is clear on my end. And Rumble is also streaming. Oh no, maybe it did cut. No, it seems okay. It seems okay. We may call it a night though, if it's cutting out. Patricia, you did this with the sun, male, moon, female controversy. That's true. That's probably exactly what's happening. Okay, we'll cut off anyways, because if it's gonna start getting choppy, it's not worth the pain. Joffrey said, I saw a documentary on Jesus' birth that tracked the Star of Bethlehem backwards in time, and came up with a date. The date was then confirmed, in my opinion, by a few Revelation sections. I'm curious about this whole, I'm so ignorant to this. How are they going back in time with stars? How do they track that which has already happened? How is that provable? And maybe I'm just really dumb when it comes to this, but I don't understand how you would do that backwards. I'm curious, guy, but I think this is still cutting out, so I think we are going to just cut off here. I've seen several too, Geoffrey. I'm not sold on any of the dates because multiple ones seem plausible. Still very intriguing. Yeah, Ghost, you said you'd send me a video. Please do that. I'm curious. I'm curious about a lot tonight. A lot of stuff came up tonight, and I'm kind of bummed that we can't talk about it. I'm very curious about a number of different things. I can hear you again. Yeah, I don't know, but actually something did happen because Rumble cut off. But my internet is fine, and YouTube is fine. So I'm not sure what's happening. But it's 7 o'clock anyways, so we will just call it a night. I might post a poll tonight about Saturday, because there's a possibility I will be moving it to tomorrow, because Saturday might be difficult. Sorry, we are cramming and trying to do everything we can to get ready for a baby that we are not ready for. So the schedule stuff's going to be weird. But I don't want to skip anything. So I might just do the Gospel of Judas tomorrow, and whoever can make it can make it. But I'll let you know in Discord. Before we... No, actually, we're good. Hope David recovers, though. Yeah, everyone pray for David. Pray for David. Pray for all of our sanity after this. We read very little, which are my favorite nights. This was good stuff. Very good stuff. I feel very, very confused, which I feel like means we did something positive. So that's good. All right. I'll post in Discord if we have to do the Gospel of Judas tomorrow night. Sunday should be normal, probably. If it's not, I'll let you know. And then Tuesday, we'll do free will. Free will for Tuesday. So I will get that all set up. And I'm going to cut here before something happens with the YouTubes again. If you can still hear me. Love ya. Love ya. Good talk. Have a lovely, wonderful evening. See you tomorrow or Saturday for the Gospel of Judas. Love you, bye. Later, Tampa. Great talk. Thank you all for your input, fellas. Yeah, it was very good. I'm wildly confused. It means we did good work.